Normally, purchasing a laptop is pretty simple. You click on the one that you like and you just add it to your cart. This doesn't apply to the Alienware R4, since on the website Dell offers you plenty of options to make your configuration perfect, which is why I'm making this video, to show you the best configuration you could get at the lowest price without sacrificing too much performance. The easiest decision was the processor. You have the choice between the i9 with a 5.3 GHz max turbo boost, while the i7 only has 5, so it's only a difference of 0.3, which basically means Dell's asking to pay almost $400 more for a 0.3 difference in gigahertz. That difference is so small that you probably won't even notice it while gaming. I'll have a video linked down below that showcases the difference between gameplay with an i7 and an i9 if you're still curious about the difference. But if you don't care about the extra $400, then I suggest picking up the i9 if you want a few more frames per second. But in terms of price versus performance, the i7 is a much better deal. So for the RAM, I chose 32 gigs. Even though 16 gigs is the standard, these Alienware laptops don't have replaceable RAM. So if you're gonna pick a RAM, you're gonna have to stick with it. 16 gigs of RAM is perfectly normal for modern gaming. Even games like Cyberpunk 2077 only asks for a recommendation of 12 gigs of RAM. Since the RAM isn't replaceable or upgradable, I chose the 32 gig option to future-proof this laptop, since in the future, titles will start demanding more than 16 gigs in their requirements. There's no 64 gig option on the Dell website, but that's not a problem since 64 gigs is a little bit too much for gaming. I got the Dark Side of the Moon version of the Alienware laptop, which can output at a refresh rate of 144 Hz. 144 Hz is perfect for playing games at 120 frames. There's also a 300 Hz option. I would only recommend this if you're gonna play a lot of indie games or esports. Getting frames beyond 120 will give you a competitive edge in esports titles. There's also a 4K option, but it's limited to 60 Hz and it's an OLED display. I wouldn't recommend this option because 4K isn't very noticeable on a 15 or 7-inch screen. I would also worry about the OLED option, since it would likely result in burn-in. The 4K OLED option is only worth it if you plan to do a lot of photoshopping on the Alienware. But the Alienware is a gaming system, so for gaming, 4K and 60 Hz isn't worth it. A much better option would have been a 2K screen with a higher refresh rate, since with the 3080 graphics card, you're more likely to play games at 144p than 4K. To get the most performance out of your Alienware, it's best to pick the RTX 3080, which as of right now is the most powerful NVIDIA graphics card for laptops. Alienware offers two choices of VRAM with this card. You have 8 gigs or 16 gigs. 8 gigs is enough VRAM for modern gaming. 16 gigs is a bit too much, especially when you compare it to the desktop version of the card, which only has 10 gigs of VRAM. If you're a person who likes using mods in your games, you should consider the 16 gig version of the card. Even though there's plenty of laptops that have RTX 3080s in them, not many of them can match the Alienware's levels of performance, and the reason why is because the Alienware's RTX has a wattage of 165. This higher wattage allows the RTX 3080 to utilize its full potential. So unlike the RAM, the SSDs in the Alienware are replaceable and upgradable, which means you could start off small with 1 terabyte SSD and eventually go up to 4 terabytes, which is the limit. I recommend you pick the 2 terabyte option since it's a happy medium. It would allow you to store many modern titles on your system, and if you feel that isn't enough, you can always open up the system and add another SSD. And of course, because these are M.2 NVMe drives, they're pretty fast when it comes to loading games. Alienware gives you the option between having a 4-zone RGB or a per-key RGB. This is purely a design decision and will not impact your performance, so you could go with whatever. There's also an option for a cherry mechanical keyboard. Mechanical keyboards on laptop are usually unheard of. The normal keyboard that Alienware comes with is pretty good on its own, so I don't see the necessity for you to pick the mechanical keyboard. And if you really want a mechanical keyboard, it is better to get an external one that you can connect with USB, because mechanical keyboards on laptops are inherently inferior because they have to have a smaller form factor so they could fit in the laptop when it closes. If you want your Alienware laptop to be portable, I suggest going with the M15. If you want slightly better thermals, I suggest going with the M17. The 17-inch version has better temperatures since it's bigger, which means there's much more room in between the components, which allows better airflow. Of course, the increased size makes the laptop harder to travel with. Hopefully that influenced your decision on which configurations to get. All the options I told you about are very similar to the ones on my laptop, which is good news because so far I haven't found a single game that I couldn't run at least at 60 frames. And if you have any questions about the Alienware, be sure to comment down below.